Wasn't too long ago, sometime this summer, that I was visiting our grandchildren, and I had little Emma on my lap, and I was reading her a book. And so I started out just reading the book, and it said, "Once upon a time, a long time ago." And then I told her a story. Was I lying? Of course not. That's how fairy tales start. Wasn't lying, that's just the way it is. Fairy tales start that way. Well, apocalypses, of which the Revelation of John is one of many, 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 they just start with somebody saying, "I turned my eyes to heaven and an angel spoke to me." It doesn't mean that an angel did that, it just means that's how the story starts. This is a carefully crafted work. By the time we've gotten to the 20th verse in the first chapter, I lost count at 28 allusions to the Old Testament. This is packed full of carefully constructed symbolism. Inspired, certainly, as anything creative is inspired by the presence of God. But it's not intended to predict the future. Not intended to tell us about a millennium just before the end. With that in mind, would you listen to the Word of God as it comes to you through the Spirit? "I am the Alpha and the Omega, saith Adonai your God, who is and who was and who is to come, the Almighty. I, John, your brother, who share with you in Jesus the persecution and the reign of God with patient endurance, was on the island called Patmos because of the Logos of God and the testimony of Jesus. I was in the Spirit on that Lord's day and heard behind me a loud voice like a trumpet saying, 'Write in a book what you see and send it to the 7 churches, to Ephesus, to Smyrna, to Pergamum, to Thyatira, to Sardis, to Philadelphia, and to Laodicea.' Then I turned to see whose voice it was that spoke to me, and on turning I saw 7 golden lampstands. And in the midst of the lampstands I saw one like the Son of Man, clothed with a long robe with a gold sash around his chest. His head and his hair were like white wool, white as snow. His eyes were like a flame of fire. His feet were like burnished bronze, refined as in a furnace. And his voice was like the sound of many waters. In his right hand he held 7 stars. And from his mouth came a sharp 2-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining with full force. When I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. But he placed his right hand upon me and said, 'Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last. I am the living one. I was dead, and see, I am alive forever and ever. I have the keys to death and Hades. Now write what you have seen, what is and what is to take place after this. And as for the mystery of those 7 stars that you saw in my right hand and the 7 golden lampstands, the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches.'" Most days I feel like my life is pretty much under control. I would imagine the same is true for you. Really, we can't live with a feeling that nothing's under control at any time. So most days, we do feel as though our lives are under control. We have family, we have friends, we have a job, whatever it is, but we have a construct of our lives that we can feel comfortable in or maybe even uncomfortable in, but at least it's there, it's the known. So we plan ahead and we work at it. Now we know in theory or in the abstract that this is not true. It's why you laughed when I said that I feel most days like my life is in control. So we know in the abstract. But then there are those moments. There's those moments when it all comes crashing in upon us. I got a note from a friend this week, pretty good friend, telling me that his His wife had had what appears to be a fourth reoccurrence of cancer. I won't tell you about his feelings, but it really brought back the feelings that I had when that happened to my first wife. I felt isolated. I felt alone. I felt isolated from her. I felt isolated from everybody around me. You know, I was a pastor at the time, and you know what happens to a pastor when something's going on in his or her life? The congregation tries to pastor you. They say that, you know, oh, well, we feel for you. We'll do anything for you. You know, that happens to you too, right? And you know, it doesn't help because they're not there. There's a barrier. They don't get the sense, really, of what's happening to you. So you're isolated and alone when all of that comes crashing down, when that image of being in charge falls apart. The lonely place. The 9th anniversary of the bombing of the World Trade Center towers, really, as they came down, everything came crashing down around our nation. You know, we thought we were in control of our own destiny. Turns out not so much. So we felt alone and isolated in some sense from the world around us. There were feelings of anger. There were feelings of guilt. There were feelings of deep frustration. We'd lost control, isolated and alone. And so at this moment, what do? We scramble to be able to get the equilibrium back, to try and find some way, frankly, any way, to pull it back together so we can feel like our lives are in control again. But too often we do that, and we have no compass as we try and figure it out. It's as though we're flailing about, trying to get a sense of how we can just get back to equilibrium, never mind how we get there. I wonder, for instance, my first reaction when Deb got that fourth recurrence, she was the major breadwinner in the family. My first reaction was to be in shock and what is going to happen to me? And I went into my study and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what I'd do with the budget. How was I going to live and raise these kids without her? Maybe a reasonable thing to do. Find equilibrium, try and be at least smart about things, but I wonder if maybe it didn't make me withdraw from her a bit. I don't know, it was a long time ago, and I'm not going to carry that guilt for too long, but you just got to wonder. You just got to wonder whether or not getting back to equilibrium puts you in a place where you're not yourself anymore. Wonder about our nation, too. And I'm not the only one. Ted Koppel, with whom I often disagree politically, had this to say in the Washington Post. I don't know if you saw it. Little piece called 9 Years After 9/11, Let's Stop Fulfilling Bin Laden's Goals. Bin Laden does not deserve that we even inadvertently fulfill so many of his unimagined dreams. Didn't have to be that way. The Bush administration's initial response was just about right. The calibrated combination of CIA operatives, special forces, and air power broke the Taliban in Afghanistan and sent bin Laden and the remnants of al-Qaeda scurrying across the border to Pakistan. The American reaction was quick, powerful, and effective, a clear warning to any organization contemplating another terrorist